The Metropolitan Grand Ballroom radiated the kind of polished grandeur that only comes from bottomless budgets and flawless taste. Ceilings stretched 30 feet above marble floors laced with golden inlays, while crystal chandeliers poured warm amber light over tables draped in silk and crowned with orchid arrangements that cost more than most people's monthly rent. My parents' 20th wedding anniversary gala had turned the city's most coveted venue into something out of a fairy tale. More than 300 guests had gathered to mark a quarter-century of marriage in jaw-dropping luxury, and there I stood near the dessert table in a simple navy dress from Target, quietly watching the elaborate theater of wealth and social maneuvering play out around me. The guest list read like a who's who of the city's most powerful circles: corporate heavyweights, political figures, entertainment names, and old money dynasties for whom networking was less a skill than an instinct. My mother presided over the room in a custom Valentino gown worth more than most people's vehicles, while my father commanded attention in a bespoke Italian tuxedo, both of them practically glowing with the pride of hosting the season's most talked-about social event. My brother Jonathan moved through the crowd with the easy confidence of someone who always sensed opportunity, his wife Miranda gleaming beside him in jewelry that apparently warranted its own security arrangement. They had just returned from purchasing their fourth vacation property, somewhere in Monaco, from what I'd managed to catch, and were enthusiastically regaling anyone within earshot with tales of European real estate and the intricacies of private jet scheduling. My sister Vanessa held court near the champagne fountain alongside her hedge fund manager husband, the two of them radiating the effortless assurance of people who had never once questioned their right to occupy rooms like this. Conversation flowed smoothly between stock market forecasts, recent art auction outcomes, and seats on charitable boards, the standard vocabulary of people for whom financial anxiety was a foreign concept. "Amanda." Jonathan's voice cut across the ballroom as he spotted me near the dessert display. "There you are. I was just telling the Hendersons about the family." He made his way over with his trademark blend of genuine warmth and barely disguised superiority, Miranda gliding beside him wearing the practiced smile of someone long accustomed to being the most impressively dressed woman in any given room. "Amanda works in, what was it again?" he asked, though we had revisited this exact conversation at every family event for the past 5 years. "Administrative consulting," I replied quietly, already knowing where it was heading. "Right, administrative consulting," he echoed, pitching his voice for the small audience of well-dressed guests who had drifted toward us. "What she means is temp work. Office filing, data entry, that sort of thing." The assembled group responded with polite murmurs of understanding laced with barely concealed sympathy. Everyone understood that even the most accomplished families occasionally produced a member who simply couldn't manage to reach the same heights as the rest. "It's actually project-based business consulting," I said gently, though I already knew the correction would go nowhere. "Same difference, really," Miranda replied with her rehearsed socialite laugh. "What matters is that Amanda is happy with the life she's chosen." Mrs. Henderson, wife of the city's most prominent real estate developer, attempted a diplomatic rescue. "Administrative work is genuinely important. Organizations simply couldn't function without capable support staff." "Absolutely," Jonathan agreed with theatrical conviction. "Somebody has to look after the small details while people like us keep our eyes on the bigger picture. Amanda has found her niche, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with that." The conversation moved on through various business ventures and investment opportunities, and I was occasionally pulled in with questions clearly designed to underscore how little I grasped about high finance and corporate strategy. "The thing is," Jonathan said at one point, his voice carrying to nearby tables, "evenings like this really put everything into perspective. Look at this room, these people, this atmosphere, this level of refinement. This is what success actually produces. The ability to bring together the most influential people in the city for an evening like this." He swept his arm grandly across the magnificent ballroom. "The Metropolitan Grand probably runs $50,000 just for the space," he continued, clearly savoring his audience's impressed reactions. Factor in the catering, the entertainment, the florals, the security. Mom and Dad are probably spending somewhere around 200,000 tonight. 200,000, someone nearby whispered in hushed awe. At least, Miranda confirmed. The champagne selection alone probably exceeds what most people earn in a year. This is what generational wealth looks like, the ability to mark life's milestones without ever glancing at the price tag. I sipped my sparkling water and listened as they dissected the evening's costs with the authority of people who'd attended hundreds of similar affairs. The orchestra, they figured, probably ran 15,000 for the night. The floral work was easily 20,000. The bespoke menu from the city's most exclusive caterer added another 30. Amanda could never come close to affording anything like this, Jonathan said, his tone sliding into gentle condescension. Her temp work probably brings in what, 30,000 a year? Maybe 40 if she's having a good run. It really is sweet that Mom and Dad include her in evenings like this, Vanessa added, joining our circle with her husband in tow. It gives her a chance to experience this kind of luxury, even if only for one night. The group nodded with benevolent understanding, visibly pleased with their own charitable magnanimity toward a less fortunate family member. The sad truth, Jonathan continued, warming to his favorite subject, is that Amanda will never truly belong in rooms like this. She can attend, she's family, obviously, but she'll always be the one who doesn't quite fit. His voice dropped to what he likely imagined was a discreet whisper, though it carried perfectly to the surrounding tables. Look at her clothes, her jewelry, her overall presentation. She's making an effort, bless her, but anyone can see she isn't comfortable at this level. This kind of environment is for people who understand what real success looks like. It must be hard, Mrs. Henderson offered sympathetically, attending events where everyone else operates in such a completely different financial universe. I'm sure it is, Miranda agreed. But Amanda seems to manage it well. She knows her place. The conversation rolled on in this vein as the evening's entertainment kicked in a string quartet that had performed at Carnegie Hall, followed by a jazz ensemble that typically graced presidential inaugurations. Standard fare for people who considered world-class excellence a baseline expectation rather than a remarkable luxury. I quietly excused myself from the group and moved toward the terrace doors, needing a breath of fresh air after listening to my family dissect my supposed financial shortcomings with such clinical detachment. The cool night air was a welcome relief as I stepped onto the marble terrace overlooking the city's glittering skyline. My phone buzzed with a message from my head of security, everything proceeding smoothly. Should we implement the family protocol as discussed? I typed back, not yet. Let me know if Jonathan becomes more of an issue. Amanda, a familiar voice called from behind me. I turned to find Marcus Chin, the Metropolitan Grand's general manager, approaching with his customary professional composure. We'd worked together for 3 years across various events and property improvements, and he'd become one of my most trusted venue managers. Ms. Williams, he corrected himself, using the formal address we'd agreed upon for public appearances. I wanted to make sure everything is meeting your expectations this evening. It's perfect, Marcus. Your team has truly outdone themselves, thank you. I told him the Hendersons had inquired about booking the ballroom for their daughter's wedding the following spring, and suggested they contact my office directly to handle the scheduling. Marcus nodded and returned inside, leaving me alone with the city lights and the distant sounds of celebration drifting through the terrace doors. I stayed outside for about 10 minutes, appreciating the calm contrast to the elaborate social performance unfolding within. When I returned to the ballroom, I found Jonathan holding court near the bar with an even larger crowd around him, his voice now carrying with noticeably less restraint. What people fail to grasp about wealth, he was saying, with the authority of someone who had inherited rather than built his position, is that it goes far beyond money. It's about knowing how to move through sophisticated circles, how to recognize quality, how to engage meaningfully in important conversations. He gestured around the room with visible satisfaction. My sister Amanda, for instance, she's a genuinely sweet person, but she simply doesn't have the foundation to truly appreciate an event of this caliber. She can attend, of course, but she doesn't really belong here in any meaningful sense. The crowd murmured its agreement, pleased to be receiving this insider perspective on family dynamics and social hierarchies. This venue, these people, this entire world, it's simply beyond the scope of her experience. Tomorrow she'll go back to her little apartment and her temp jobs, and tonight will just be a brief window into a life she'll never truly understand. I walked past the group toward the reception desk where Marcus was coordinating with the catering staff. Marcus, I said quietly, could you have security have a word with my brother? He seems to have grown a bit too comfortable with the bar service. Of course, Ms. Williams. Should they handle it discreetly? Whatever approach seems most fitting for the situation. Marcus spoke briefly into his headset, and within moments 2 uniformed security officers approached Jonathan's animated circle. Excuse me, sir, the lead officer said politely. The boss would like a word with you. Jonathan laughed, still riding the high of his audience's attention. The boss? You mean the venue manager? I'm Jonathan Williams. This is my mother's anniversary party. Yes, sir. We're aware of the family connection. Ms. Williams specifically asked that we speak with you. Ms. Williams. Jonathan's expression shifted from amusement to bewilderment. You mean my sister Amanda? What on earth would she need security for? The second officer stepped forward with measured courtesy. Sir, Ms. Williams owns this venue. She's requested that you moderate your behavior, or we'll need to ask you to leave. The silence that followed was so absolute I could make out the jazz ensemble's piano solo from across the ballroom. She owns what? Jonathan's voice came out barely above a murmur. The Metropolitan Grand Hotel and Conference Center, the officer explained, unhurried and composed. Miss Amanda Williams is the owner. She's asked us to address your disruptive conduct. The circle of elegantly dressed guests who had been enjoying Jonathan's running commentary on my lack of sophistication now fixed their gaze on him with rapt attention, sensing that the evening had taken a sharp and unexpected turn. That's impossible, Miranda said, her voice pitching upward. Amanda does temp work. She cannot possibly own a property like this. Ma'am, the officer replied with professional neutrality, I can assure you that Ms. Williams is the owner. This conversation is taking place at her direct request. Jonathan looked around the circle of faces, his earlier confidence completely dissolved. There must be some mistake. Amanda doesn't have that. This is a multi-million-dollar property. 47 million, to be precise, I said, approaching the group with Marcus at my side. Though that was the acquisition price 3 years ago. Current valuation is probably closer to 60 million. The silence stretched on uncomfortably as Jonathan tried to absorb this. Amanda, he said slowly, what are you talking about? Williams Hospitality Group, I said evenly. We own 17 properties across 6 cities. The Metropolitan Grand was one of our earlier acquisitions. Mrs. Henderson leaned forward, openly fascinated. Amanda, Williams Hospitality Group, that's your company? You manage the luxury event spaces throughout the region. Among other things, we focus on high-end venues serving corporate events and private celebrations. But the temp work, Vanessa said weakly, having materialized at the edge of our conversation. You said you do administrative consulting. I do consulting work for venue operations and event management. It's how I spot acquisition opportunities and identify operational improvements across existing properties. Marcus stepped forward with evident pride. Ms. Williams has completely transformed our event services over the past 3 years. The Metropolitan Grand has become the most sought-after venue in the city under her direction. Jonathan stared at me as though I'd become an entirely different person. Amanda, how is any of this possible? Where did $47 million come from? The hospitality industry is considerably more profitable than most people assume, I said simply, especially when you understand operations from the ground up. Ground up? Miranda echoed faintly. I started with a small event space downtown 5 years ago. Learned catering, venue management, guest services, everything through direct hands-on work. When larger properties came onto the market, I already had the expertise to see their potential. The security officer cleared his throat diplomatically. Ms. Williams, shall we proceed with the removal, or has this been resolved? I think we're fine now. Though please make sure the bar service stays appropriately managed for the rest of the evening. Of course, ma'am. As the officers returned to their posts, the guests surrounding us continued to stare with expressions ranging from shock to dawning comprehension. My father appeared beside our group with my mother, both of them clearly having caught enough of the exchange to be thoroughly disoriented. Amanda, Dad said, "What is Williams Hospitality Group?" "My company, Dad. I founded it to acquire and operate luxury event venues." "Your company?" Mom repeated, her voice unsteady. "Amanda, you own this entire hotel?" "The hotel, the conference center, the adjoining restaurant, and the parking structure. It's all one integrated property." Dad lowered himself heavily into the nearest chair. "This venue, tonight's celebration, you're paying for your mother's anniversary party yourself. It's complimentary, obviously. Owner's privilege. Complimentary." Mom's voice was barely audible. "Amanda, what would an event like tonight normally cost?" "Around $250,000, all-inclusive." Jonathan's estimate was reasonably close. He just missed a few line items. The figure seemed to hang in the air above our family group, filling the silence around us. $250,000, Vanessa whispered. "As a gift. It's Mom's 25th anniversary. That deserves a proper celebration." Jonathan found his voice again, though it wavered. "Amanda, I don't understand any of this. If you own properties like this, if you have this kind of money, why do you live so quietly? Why do you dress the way you do? Why don't you show any of it?" "Show what? That I have money? That I can afford expensive clothes and jewelry." I looked around the ballroom. "I'd rather put resources into creating meaningful experiences for other families than into impressing people at parties." "But the things we said tonight," Miranda interjected, her voice strained, "about you not belonging here, not understanding wealth, were said while you were standing in a venue I own, at a party I'm hosting, surrounded by staff I employ," I finished. The irony needed no further comment. Marcus approached again, this time carrying a folder. "Ms. Williams, the Henderson wedding contract is ready for your review, and the Morrison Corporate Group wants to discuss expanding their annual conference to include our sister property in Denver." "Denver?" Dad asked, looking up. "Williams Hospitality operates venues in 6 cities," I explained. "We're moving into Texas and Florida next year." 6 cities, Mom repeated mechanically. "Amanda, what is Williams Hospitality Group worth?" "Current portfolio valuation is approximately $340 million. Annual revenue runs around $180 million across all properties. The number settled over our family like a tide rolling in, slow, inevitable, and impossible to stop." $340 million, Jonathan said, his voice carrying something that sounded almost like nausea. "Give or take. Property values shift with the market." Vanessa put her head in her hands. "I told you that you didn't belong here. I told you that you didn't understand what real wealth looked like." "While celebrating at an event I own and am hosting at no charge," I noted. "Yes." I heard every word. The jazz ensemble finished their set to enthusiastic applause from 300 guests who had no idea they were witnessing the most extraordinary family revelation in the Metropolitan Grand's history. "Amanda," Dad said quietly, "why didn't you tell us? All these years we thought." "Thought what?" "That I was failing because I chose hospitality instead of a more conventional career path." "We were worried about you," Mom said. "We wanted you to have security. Stability. I have both. I simply don't feel the need to announce my net worth at family dinners to feel secure in myself." "But the way we treated you," Jonathan said, his earlier condescension entirely gone. "The things we said about your choices, your career, showed me exactly who you are when you believe it doesn't matter what you say to someone." My phone buzzed again. my assistant. Phoenix acquisition documents ready for Monday signing. Atlanta venue tour confirmed for Thursday. I should look in on our other properties, I said, glancing at the message. We have 3 events running this weekend across different cities. 3 other events? Vanessa asked. A corporate retreat in Phoenix, a wedding in Atlanta, and a political fundraiser in Denver. A busy weekend for the Williams hospitality team. As the evening wound down and guests began making their way out, my family sat with the unfamiliar weight of understanding who I actually was, not the unsuccessful temp worker they'd dismissed for years, but the owner of the very venue where they had spent the evening explaining why I didn't belong among accomplished people. Amanda, Mom said as the final guests were departing, I owe you an apology. Tonight was the most beautiful celebration we could have dreamed of. It was my pleasure, I said, hugging her. 25 years of marriage deserves to be celebrated right. But more than that, she continued, I'm sorry for not seeing what you'd built. For not understanding what you were quietly accomplishing all this time. You saw what you expected to see, I said simply. People generally do. As my family collected their coats and called for their cars, I watched them quietly come to terms with the evening's revelations. Tomorrow, when they returned to their social worlds and their friends asked about the extraordinary anniversary celebration, when they tried to explain how their supposedly unsuccessful daughter had left them speechless, everything would be different. Not because I had finally proven myself worthy of their admiration, but because they had learned, at considerable personal cost, what it means to measure someone's worth by their job title rather than by what they've actually built. Williams' hospitality group had larger expansions on the horizon, better properties under consideration, and more families to serve with celebrations they would never forget. And for the first time in 5 years, I wouldn't have to justify any of it to people who had long since decided I wasn't worth taking seriously. The Metropolitan Grand settled back into its usual composed elegance as the last guests filtered out, leaving only the quiet efficiency of my staff restoring the ballroom to its immaculate state. Tomorrow, another family would come to write their own chapter of memories in a space I had built from nothing. And I would go on doing exactly what I loved, creating beautiful rooms for the moments in life that matter most.